Whenever you're trying to accomplish something big, something that's outside of the norm, usually it comes with some really big obstacles that you have to overcome. Now, the freight broker business is no different. As a freight broker, when you first start your business, there are two big obstacles that are waiting for you. The first obstacle that you have to overcome is you have to go out and get customers, persuade those customers to do business with your company. And the second big obstacle that awaits you that often is overlooked is the fact that right now you don't have any credit established. And moving freight without established credit is definitely something that you have to get beyond. So in this video today, what I'm going to do is I'll share with you, number one, what type of credit that you need to establish as a new freight broker, and then number two, how to build the credit that you need to move your business forward. So come on inside, sit back, relax, and let's get down into the business. So you may be wondering why you would need credit as a freight broker. What would be the purpose in having credit? Well, let me explain how it works. As a freight broker, when I go to a shipper and offer a certain price, let's say I offered $1,000 to move a load. And then the shipper says, okay, bam, you have the load. Now I'm going to take that load and I'm going to start negotiating with carriers to move that load. So let's just say I got a carrier that says, oh, I can move the load for $700. He picks that load up and he delivers the load. Well, now what happens is the freight broker is responsible for paying that carrier. And the carrier will extend what we refer to as short-term credit to the freight broker. Now, he's going to do that one of two ways. He'll extend that credit through his own business, himself, or he'll extend that credit to the freight broker through a factoring company. Now, here's where the problem comes in at. If he extends credit through you through a factoring company, that factoring company is going to check your credit history. And right now, as a new freight broker, you don't have credit established. As a matter of fact, you have what we refer to as an N, as in November rating, meaning you are too new to rate. So no established credit means that that factoring company will not factor that load most times. So now, what are freight factoring companies expecting you to have as far as credit established as a freight broker business? What they're looking for is that you've been paying those carriers consistently over time. And when you don't have that type of credit established, they are less likely to extend you credit. But now, are there some things that you can do in the meantime? Because all new freight brokers start out with no credit. How do new freight brokers move loads without having established credit? That's what we're going to get into next. Now, most of us start off at the bottom and we have to work our way to the top. A part of working your way to the top is being able to move loads in unfavorable conditions. Unfavorable conditions means that you are now a new freight broker and you don't have established credit and you still have to figure out how to move loads even though you don't have established credit, because that period of time, is going to be there until you establish credit. So once you establish credit, then it becomes a lot easier to move loads. But right now we don't have credit. So how do we get loads moved in the now, in this moment? Well, here's what I do. When I first started my business and I didn't have credit, the thing that I wanted to make sure of was that I built relationships with carriers first. And that's the way that I do business since I've started my business and throughout. But that is so critically important. What I want to make sure that that carrier understands is that I am a small business person just like he or she is. And I am going to make sure, as a matter of fact, it's my top priority to make sure that he gets paid or she gets paid. Because I understand that you are a small business owner. I understand that you have to get paid in order for your business to be successful. In order for you to do the things that you want to do, you have to get paid. I understand the importance of that. So I want to make sure that that carrier and I are on the same sheet of music. Once I've established that, then I want to talk to him about perhaps maybe not working with a factoring company. Work directly with me so we can eliminate the factoring company, and now I don't have to go through a credit check with the factoring company. And I think a good question to ask yourself as a business person is, what kind of risk does this pose to my carrier? If he does decide to go ahead and say, hey, I'm going to work with you instead of working with the factoring company, what kind of risk does that expose him to? Because in understanding the risk, you want to help to mitigate that risk. And how I would mitigate the risk of working directly with me instead of a factoring company, I would let the carrier know, hey, you don't have to worry about me paying the invoice. I work with a factoring company and they are going to make sure that the invoices get paid, but I am going to make sure that they pay it. And our hope is that after we explain that to the carrier, that he'll say, okay, I don't need to work with my factoring company. I'll work directly with you. But sometimes you have carriers, even after you explain that, they say, hey man, I've been burned too many times. I just cannot afford to do that. So they'll say, hey, I'll work with you through my factoring company, but I won't work with you without the factoring company. So when they say that, now the next step that we will take is say, hey, is it okay if I get your factoring company's number and a representative that you're working with over there? I want to give them a call and see if we can get set up on what we call a one-load move. That way, you're saying to that carrier, hey, I don't want to abandon this load just yet. Just let me see if I can get set up with your factoring company. And if I can, then we can go ahead and get the load moved. If not, then we'll have to move on. And something that's important to remember is that once that carrier knows that there may be a problem with you getting approved through their factoring company, what do you think they're going to do? They're very likely going to start to look for another load, because they're not going to let their truck be tied up and then you go to the factoring company and don't get approved and they have to start from zero. So they're going to go ahead and start looking for loads. So you want to make sure that you're moving quickly. When you start calling that factoring company to let them know that you want to get set up on a one load move, you want to get that carrier's information, get his name, so that they can call him and let him know that you have been approved. That way he can go ahead and be comfortable with the fact of knowing that you're good to go, and perhaps you can still go ahead and get that load moved. And you also have to be concerned with that also, because now that the carrier is kind of shaky on whether or not you're going to be able to get approved, you have to be looking in your mind and say, okay, well, if this doesn't work out, I got to get out here and get this load sold to another carrier. And another thing that you may want to consider, especially when you're in tight lanes with tight capacity, you may not just want to let that carrier walk. You may offer to pay that carrier in advance. You may say, hey, I'll pay you half of the load when you pick it up, and I'll pay the other half when you deliver it. If the carrier agrees to that, great. If he says, no, I need all of my money up front, then that still may be something you will consider. And then there's a special way that you want to do that if you consider going that route. How I do that is, if I decide to pay in advance on a load, what I require the carrier to do is I'll say, hey, that's cool. What I need for you to do is to go to the facility and pick the load up. Once you get the BOL, take a picture of that BOL, send it to me, and then I know for a fact that that load is on the carrier's back. So then I'll go ahead and advance the money. But never advance any money without knowing that that carrier has your load. And that would even include on fuel surcharges. Always have the carrier go and get the load first. Once he gets the load, shows you the BOL, then you can go ahead and pay any advance. So as you can see, there are a lot of hoops to jump through when you don't have credit. So the idea is to go ahead and start to establish good, solid credit for your company. How do you establish good credit for a freight brokerage business? Very simple. You have to start paying carriers, and you have to report that payment somewhere. Now, what I do is with Truck Stop every 3 months, they'll send out what's called credit reference sheets. When they send those credit reference sheets out, I fill them out. Once you fill them out, you send them back to Truck Stop, and they update your credit rating after they've called those truckers that you've put on your credit reference sheet, verified the number of days that it took you to pay them. Then they'll start to update your credit, get your days to pay rating, and you'll start to see your credit rating improve. But that is one way of going ahead and starting to establish credit. Another thing that you can do is there's something called transcredit.com. That's a company. And transcredit.com is an agency, a credit agency, like you would have on the personal side with TransUnion, Equifax, or Experian. Well, TransCredit is a credit reporting agency. Well, so what you do is you start to set up with TransCredit, get an account with them, and what they'll do is the same thing. They'll send you out credit reference sheets, and you'll fill that information out as you start to move loads with carriers, and they'll take that information, they'll build you a days to pay rating and an overall credit rating once they start to verify that information with carriers. The key is to build credit, not to just say, hey, I'm not going to build any credit and I'm going to hope that I can get loads moved, or I'm going to try to get set up with factoring companies at the last minute. That's okay. That's a way of doing it, but we want to go ahead and start to build that credit, because at the end of the day, that is what's going to allow for you to move loads more efficiently. is getting good credit. When you have a good credit rating, an A rating, you can move loads with pretty much anybody. When you have an N rating, that will make it terribly difficult for you to move any load. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. I certainly hope this information has been helpful. If you want to learn more about the freight broker business, I'll leave a free link in the description. It's my 5-video series titled How the Load Movement Process Works. It will give you a look into the freight broker business, let you see me in my office, moving loads, talking to shippers, talking to carriers. That way you can get a really good idea how the business works before you come into it. And then if you want to know how we use load boards, how we use load boards to search for trucks, to post our loads, and also as a rate sourcing tool so we can start forming our rate, I'll leave a free video right here. So until the next time, I wish you the very best in your life and business.
Please like, subscribe and click the bell so you don't miss anything.
Because the bottom is much too crowded.